Hi everyone, welcome to another LeetCode tutorial video. In this video, I'm going to be going over LeetCode 2708, maximum strength of a group. I'm going to be kind of breaking down the question, then doing a bit of a whiteboard explanation of how we're going to solve it, and then we're going to write some code. So before we get into that, let me just say, if you're serious about data structures and algorithms, you want to get good, you want to land that dream job, then I would highly recommend checking out my course on data structures and algorithms. I've designed it specifically for kind of landing that dream job. It teaches you exactly how to do it. I'm an ex-Amazon software engineer. I've done it before. I teach you exactly how to do it. So the link will be at the top of the description. I'd highly recommend checking it out if you want to get serious about this kind of stuff. So let's get into it. Basically, let's have a quick read over the question. So you were given a zero-indexed integer array nums representing the score of students in an exam. So we just have an array of numbers, and each number represents the score of a student. So the teacher would like to form one non-empty group of students with maximal strength, where the strength of a group of students is defined as their individual scores multiplied by each other. Okay, so this is kind of, it's quite a wordy, it adds a bit of unnecessary complexity, this description, but to put it simply, what we want to do is we have an array of numbers where each number is the score of a student, and we want to select select some of those numbers so that the resulting subarray, when we multiply all the numbers together, is the maximum that we can get out of any sort of combination. So it's going to become a bit clearer when we look at the examples. So let's take a quick look at these examples here. So we have an array nums 3, -1, -5, 2, 5, and -9. So this is all the scores of each individual student, and what we want to do is select some of these numbers to form a new array where when we multiply all those numbers together, it produces the maximum result that we can. So the maximum result, or the strength, as they're referring to it, is 1350. So the way they've done this is they've selected 3, -5, 2, 5, and -9, as you can see here. And when we multiply that, it equals 1350. And so that's the most that we can get. So let's look at another quick example just to kind of grasp how this is happening before we get into kind of breaking it down. So nums, -4, -5, and -4. And so the maximum, or the strength, is 20, which is just -4 times -5. Okay, so we skipped -4 in this scenario, and we skipped -1 in this scenario. We don't have to skip any, but we can skip, a bunch if we need to. It really depends on whatever produces the maximum strength. So cool. Now let's actually kind of consider this question, how we're going to solve it. So let's look at two examples. These are much more basic than these, but I think they kind of illustrate how we're going to solve it as best as possible. So this is one example. We have an array nums 3, 4, and 5. Okay. So we have a little think. What do you think the maximum strength of this is going to be? So we need to select some elements out of this, as many as we want, or at least one, so that when they're multiplied together, they're going to produce the maximum. So if you think about it, the maximum, because they're all positive, is just 3 times 4 times 5. We want to select all of these. We're going to select every single one of these, and that's going to produce, so 3 times 4 is 12, times 5 is 60, right? So this gives us one of our kind of solutions here, or one of our tricks. So if they're all positive, we just want to select all of them, because it's just going to get continually bigger as we go on. So any number greater than 0, if we multiply it by the sum, it's going to either stay the same if it's 1, or it's going to get bigger. So we always want a positive number. So now let's look at the opposite, right? So we have -3, -4, and -5. Okay, so these ones get a little bit more tricky, but I think the most important thing to remember is just kind of the basic math concept that a negative times a negative is always going to equal a positive, right? So when we think about this in this scenario, we have some combinations. So we can do them all together. So that would be -3 times -4, so that's 12, right? And then times -5 is -60, which is that's one possible solution. But let's kind of see let's see what we have. So then let's do -3. You know, as we saw when we just did -3 times -4, that just gave us 12, which is bigger than 60. So this is already a better solution. Okay. So and then let's look at another solution. What about -4 times -5? That gives us 20. Okay. So that again is a much better solution. So from that, and then last combination, I guess while we're at it, -3 times -5 is 15. It's not 20, but it's still, you know, a good solution. Okay, so the maximum that we could get here is 20, which is -4 times -5. And so for this one, of course, it was just every single one. So this gives us kind of another trick here that we're going to use to solve this problem, which is that with negative numbers, we always want an even number of them, right? So we're always going to want an even number of negative numbers so they cancel out. So you can see in this example, we've only selected 2 negative numbers because we don't want the third because it's going to make it negative. But if there were 4 here, let's say it was, you know, -6, then that's going to be a different story because that's going to make it bigger because it's going to go around to positive again. So because we'll have 4 negative numbers. So that gives us our second trick, which is that for negative numbers, we want 2 of them. We never want an odd number of negative numbers, unless, for example, just kind of throwing out edge cases here, unless there's the subarray consists of, or the array of numbers consists of just negative numbers, then in that case, we'll just want the biggest negative number. Okay, so we've looked at kind of the 2 biggest tips, and now let's apply them to the example that we were given in the actual question. So we have 3, -1, -5, 2, 5, -9. So we already know with our trick, we definitely want 3, we definitely want 2, we definitely want 5. We want all the positive numbers, okay? And then so now let's look back here. So in this scenario, what we wanted was our 4 and 5, right? This gave us the biggest solution. So -4, -5 equals 20. So the trick here is that we want whatever negative numbers have the largest absolute value. So whatever ones are the furthest away from 0. So in this scenario, you can see we have 3 negative numbers. So we only want to select 2 of them. We don't want to select 3, otherwise the number will be negative. So we have -1, -5, and -9. So in this scenario, -5 and -9 are the furthest away from 0, so we're going to select them. So we're going to be skipping -1 because it provides us the least value. So that's how we're going to solve this problem. That's kind of a general look over it. So now let's actually do some coding. So if I go back to LeetCode, if you think about it, so we're going to keep track of the largest negative number. So in this, because the largest negative number is the one that's closest to 0. So in this scenario, -1 is the largest negative and -3 is the largest negative. So this is the one that we don't want to include. And so we're just going to default that to -infinity. And then I'm just going to keep track of the largest number in general. So this is in relation to kind of a trick. So, or I guess rather, it's an important thing that we need to do for a certain scenario, which isn't covered by what we've done so far. So if you think about, let's say the solution is, I don't know, -1 and 0. The largest number in this is going to be 0, but because we don't want to be multiplying by 0, we're going to be skipping it. However, we're still going to want to return 0 because in this scenario, the largest score is just straight 0. So this is kind of helping kind of pick up those edge cases where we have a 0 or something like that in our array of numbers. So we're going to keep track of the largest number as well, which once again, we will initialize to -infinity. Then because we want to keep track of how many negative numbers we have, whether there's an odd number, we're going to keep track of the negative count. I'm going to initialize that at 0. Then I'm going to have a variable called strength count, which is the number of the number of students we're selecting from the array of nums, so the number of numbers that we're selecting to multiply by. And then finally, we'll also keep track of the total. So the running total, we'll initialize that as at 1 so that we can, just keep multiplying by it. Cool. So now let's actually go through each of the numbers in the array. So to start with, a lot of it's going to have to do with just kind of updating these. So if we just kind of keep these in mind, so let's start with updating largest if it needs to be updated. So largest is going to be equal to whatever is larger, either the current largest or the current number. So we'll then kind of, if you think about it, we don't want to ever multiply by 0 because that's going to just set everything to 0. So kind of if we look at another scenario, just to kind of illustrate this, if we have 1, 2, 0, 3, right? In that scenario, the largest solution is going to be 1, 2, and 3. So when we never want to multiply by 0. We sometimes want to multiply by negative numbers. We always want to multiply by positive numbers, but we never want to multiply by 0. That's something we never want to do. So we're going to need to just if the number is equal to 0, then let's just skip it because we don't want to deal with it at the moment. And then now let's update our total. So total is going to be total multiplied by the current number. And then let's increase the strength count by 1 because we just added a new number to it. And then let's deal with, let's just update negative variables. So if num is less than 0, so if it's negative, then kind of same deal as we did earlier, except just with largest negative equals maximum of either the current largest negative or the current number. And then we'll just increase our negative count. Cool. And so now we have, that's basically all we need to do with each individual number. We've gone through the array. Now it's time to kind of return our result. So the kind of the most obvious scenario, basically what we're going to need to do, if you think about it, I've gone through and I've multiplied all the numbers together if they're not 0. But if we have a negative number like this, we need to remove whatever negative number it is the closest to 0. So the largest negative number. We don't want that in there anymore if it exists. So if the negative count %2 or modulo 2 is equal to 1, so that means that we have an odd number of negative numbers, and the strength count is greater than 1, meaning that this is not the negative number is not the only number that we selected. In that case, let's remove the negative number from our total counts by dividing by it. Cool. So we've now removed the negative number from the largest negative number. Oopsie daisy. Sorry, I made a slight mistake. This should be largest negative. So we've removed the largest negative from our total if there is an odd number of negative numbers, and then we can return the integer of our total. But there's also one scenario which you might have remembered me alluding to earlier that we need to deal with. So that's in relation to 0 being the largest number, and there are not any negative numbers to cancel each other out, so to produce a positive number. So that means the largest the largest score, or the strength rather, is going to be 0. So in this case, so largest number that we've accounted is 0, and the negative count is less than 2. Because if we had 2 or more negative numbers, we can just multiply 2 together and it's going to produce a number bigger than 0. But this means, say, like this scenario that we did here, we have one negative number and we have 0. So in this case, 0 is just going to be our largest. And so in that case, we'll just return 0. So let's see if this works. Sorry guys, I have misspelled this variable. I think that's it. I think that's what it's not liking. And cool, sorry about that. So that's all working. As you can see, it's extremely efficient, both memory and runtime. So It's just O of n. It runs through the array once, and we don't. It's also O of 1 space complexity. So quite an efficient algorithm. I hope this video was really helpful. Thanks so much for watching. Have a good one.